Today, we'll be discussing the biggest question for every NFC team going into the 2023 NFL season. If you're interested in the AFC, please see my last video. But before we jump into it, I probably spent about an hour and a half to 2 hours researching and writing on each team, plus all the editing time and recording, which is about another 3 hours for each team. What I'm trying to say is that these two videos were a massive undertaking, and I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll return the favor to you by providing you with more in-depth NFL content. Outside of that, I'll be referencing DVOA and DR often in these two videos. DVOA stands for Defense Adjusted Value Over Average, and the number you see will represent how much better or worse the player is than the league average player at their position. So, for example, a 5% DVOA for a quarterback means that the quarterback was 5% better than the league average quarterback. DR stands for Defense Adjusted Yards Above Replacement and represents the yardage a player has gained or lost compared to a replacement level player at their same position. So, for example, if a quarterback has a DR of 1,000, they gained 1,000 yards over what a replacement level quarterback would have provided in that season. These stats are provided by FootballOutsiders.com, which also has a way more in-depth explanation if you care to look into it more, but that's sufficient for now. So let's get into each team's biggest questions heading into 2023, and some other interesting questions for each team. Okay, do me a favor, take a look at this list of names and tell me if you recognize any of the players on it. Okay, you definitely know Aaron Donald, very good job, gold star for you. If you follow the NFL closely, maybe you know Jordan Fuller and Kobe Durant. If you follow the draft or are a Tennessee Vols fan, perhaps you know Byron Young. But who the fuck else is on this list? Christian Roseboom? Jonah Williams? Russ Yeast? These are their starters. Like, this is actually their projected starting lineup. You want to see more on the extended list? Kelechi Enyalabetchi, anyone? Ryan Smenda Jr.? DeAndre Square? Nearly 40 of the players on the Rams' 90-man preseason depth chart are in their first year in the NFL. In fact, the average experience level of the players on the Rams roster is 1.78 years in the NFL, which is the lowest in the entire league. Only 6 of the defensive players on the Rams' 90-man roster played enough snaps to qualify for a position ranking by PFF, and only one of them ranked above 40th best in their position, and it was obviously Aaron Donald. The Rams apparently saw the threatened retirements of Aaron Donald, Sean McVay, and Matt Stafford and said never again, and just fully went out on bringing in the youngest people they could. Even on special teams, every single player is brand new and is a rookie. The Rams are taking the stars and scrubs approach to a whole new level, as they'll be playing Stafford, Aaron Donald, and Cooper Kupp, along motherfucking Russ Yeast and Braxton Burmeister. But in all seriousness, this team is a ticking time bomb. For one, even assuming injuries don't occur, the lack of depth on this team in every possible position group besides running back is terrible. Any player who struggles won't be able to be replaced with a suitable backup. Then when you add injuries into the equation, it gets a whole lot worse. Even assuming any of the rookies and inexperienced guys are able to have good seasons, you still are desperately relying on them to try to stay healthy, because again, you have no quality backups. Need I remind you that this team saw Stafford, Kupp, and Aaron Donald get injured last season? So there's the question. Which of the young and/or inexperienced players will make a name for themselves with this opportunity to start, and can their aging star players carry this inexperienced roster enough to stay in games? In terms of other questions the Rams face going into 2023, will this be the last season for Aaron Donald, Sean McVay, or Matt Stafford? Can this offensive line hold up? Will Tutu Atwell be able to meet his second-round pedigree? Can Cooper Kupp continue to dominate as he gets older and comes off a season-ending injury? Who will step up into the number 2 role in this offense? Who the fuck is playing cornerback for them? And who's playing safety, and who's playing linebacker, and who's playing like every other position? How will their special teams room of all rookies fare? Is Cam Akers staying on this team for good after trade rumors last season? And how will new offensive coordinator Mike LaFleur look? Last season, the Arizona Cardinals allowed the second most points in the league, allowed a score on 41.6% of offensive drives against them, which was third worst in the league, allowed the most yards after catch on a completion, which means they were very bad at tackling, were 5th in missed tackles, which also means they were bad at tackling, allowed a 98.2 passer rating against them, second worst, tied for 7th with the least amount of sacks, were 7th in sack percentage, allowed a third down conversion rate of 42.9, which is 5th worst, and allowed a score in the red zone on 65.2% of red zone tries, which is 3rd worst. Oh, Did I also mention they sucked? They went 4-13. To make matters worse, they lost Zach Allen in free agency and JJ Watt retired. On the other hand, the Philadelphia Eagles were 8th best in points allowed, only allowed to score on 32.4% of drives, which was 6th best in the league, forced a turnover on 15.1% of drives against them, 3rd best in the league, and had an expected points added of 20.73, which was 5th best in the league. I thought we were talking about the Cardinals. Why are the Eagles relevant? That's because new head coach Jonathan Gannon is coming over from the Eagles and will now be running this defense.
Hey! What's up, man? How you doing? Good. Good. Shoo, 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 shoo. Shots. Explosives. You can run. A big old guard. That's right. I like it. Good.
Gannon will be attempting to implement his Fangio-style scheme, which places a heavy emphasis on off coverage and will require backfield defenders to be able to tackle in space while the players on the line win their matchups. In 2022, the Arizona Cardinals defense tied for 7th fewest in sacks, while having the 2nd highest blitz rate, while the Eagles were practically the opposite, having the most sacks in the league by a whopping margin and having the 15th lowest blitz rate. Gannon has been criticized for his lack of blitzing and his lack of creativity in running stunts and games on the line. Many have argued that the crazy pressure and sack rates of the Eagles were a product of top-tier talent rather than anything special on Gannon's part. Pressure is also a necessary part of his scheme, as he's notoriously conservative in his play calls, requiring that pressure get to the quarterback quickly to avoid quarterbacks picking apart the defense underneath. However, even when pressure wasn't able to get to quarterbacks, Gannon had the benefit of working with 2 all-pro corners in Darius Slay and James Bradbury. This is basically to say that the personnel of the Eagles was suited to best fit what Gannon wanted to do: play conservative 2 high safety looks on the back end while letting the big boys up front win their matchups and get pressure on the quarterback. There's a lot of young talent on this Cardinals roster, including B.J. Ojulari, Myjai Sanders, Cam Thomas, Dante Stills, Garrett Williams, and Kytrell Clark. But this is not even close to the Eagles' defense of 2022, and it's a huge question whether Gannon's defense will work with this personnel. They don't have the elite talent up front to trust them to consistently win without blitzing, and Gannon hasn't shown the ability to be particularly creative or effective in creating pressure with designed or simulated blitzes. If this is the case, the use of his conservative off-coverage 2 safety looks will cause the defense to just get picked apart underneath, and also put a huge burden on players in the backfield to tackle an open space and to make the scheme work in general. This may lead to a similar result with what was seen with the 2021 Philadelphia Eagles, who had a pressure rate of 24%, which was 22nd in the league, only 29 sacks, the 2nd lowest in the league, 5,590 yards allowed, the 10th lowest in the league, allowing a 69.4% completion rate against them, the highest in the league, allowed a 42.9% third down conversion rate, and had 385 points allowed, which was the 18th most. The points allowed numbers don't sound horrible, and they're not, but consider the fact that the Eagles in 2021 had the 10th lowest missed tackles and were about in the middle of the league on yards allowed after the catch. What does this mean? It means that the team was allowing tons of passes to be complete in front of them and was failing to pressure the quarterback, but they were still managing to remain in the middle of the league in points allowed because they were able to consistently tackle after the catch and not allow a lot of yards. Now, apply that same logic to a team with way less talent, way younger talent, and coming off a year in which they had the 5th most missed tackles and allowed the most yards after catch on a completion against them. So there's the question. In a scheme that requires pressure and open field tackling, with a coach who is notoriously conservative in blitz rate and coverage, with a young, inexperienced defense that struggles to create pressure and tackle in the open field, can this defense show signs of life in 2023? Some other interesting questions for the Arizona Cardinals in 2023 are: can Zaven Collins and Isaiah Simmons prove they were worth a first-round pick? Can the Cardinals manage to get the number 1 and number 2 overall pick? Will Kyler play at all this season? Which rookies will make an impact? Is their defensive line improved? And can Trey Bride and Rondale Moore take the next step to being consistent contributors? Going into 2022, the Restore the Roar movement was in full force. Although the Lions were coming off an abysmal 3-13-1 season, new head coach Dan Campbell, now going into his 2nd season, appeared to be taking the Lions out of the depths of mediocrity.
These nuts.
There was finally hope for this franchise, and it was believed that they'd be able to make their first playoff appearance in 5 seasons. The season didn't start off so hot, as the team would start 1-6, mostly due to the defense, but there were games that the offense failed as well.
We may need a little bit more girth up front.
However, the team completely turned it around after Week 8. In their next 10 weeks, the Lions would go 8-2, finishing with a 9-8 record on the season, and having a chance for a win-and-in playoff game if the Seahawks lost their game on that same day.
Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and 3 toes, I will beat your ass.
Unfortunately, the Seahawks would win, meaning the Lions were eliminated and they'd go their 6th straight season without a playoff appearance, which is the 3rd longest active playoff drought. Although the roar was not fully restored, it was definitely partially restored, as the team's offense finished 5th in weighted DVOA and points scored, 3rd in yards and scoring percentage, and had the 2nd lowest turnover percent. Jared Goff finished 2nd in DR and 4th in DVOA. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a 90.7 PFF grade, which was 2nd in the NFL, and all 5 of their offensive linemen finished in the top 30 linemen at their position, including Frank Ragnow and Penei Sewell, who finished 5th and 10th, respectively. Ben Johnson had a great year as a play caller, garnering lots of head coaching interviews, but he ultimately decided to stay with the Lions. Their inability to make the playoffs was mostly attributable to the slow start in the beginning of the season, and a defense that was 4th worst in the NFL and finished with a 7.3% DVOA, which was 28th in the league. The Lions now have another year to come out and finally prove the roar has been restored and that they're here to stay as a contender. Most people, including myself, believe that they are a playoff team this year. But the question is, will they do it? We all thought it would happen this time last year, and they couldn't get there. But perhaps this is the year that the roar is restored. Other questions facing the Lions in 2023. Will this be Ben Johnson's last year with the team, as he might go on and take a head coaching role with another team? Can their draft class come out strong and prove everyone wrong? Will we see Hendon Hooker at all? What is David Montgomery's role with this team? Can Aiden Hutchinson take the next step in year 2? Is their pass rush going to be enough? Can Malcolm Rodriguez continue to outplay his draft status? Can James Houston prove to be a diamond in the rough after a great ending to 2022? Will Jameson Williams eventually make an impact on the team after a 2nd straight season of not being able to play for half the season? Can Kirby Joseph improve upon a really great rookie season? And will losing Jamal Williams kill their locker room presence and doom them for eternity? The Packers shocked the world during the 2020 NFL Draft when they traded up with the Miami Dolphins to select quarterback Jordan Love after years of being criticized for failing to add receiving talent. Wide receivers T. Higgins and Michael Pittman were still on the board, but the Packers instead decided to pick Love, even after a season in which they lost the NFC Championship game, throwing the ball to Davante Adams 9 times for 138 yards, while having to rely on Jimmy Graham and Allen Lazard for any other significant output in the receiving game. We all know how it goes from here. Rodgers gets pissed and wins MVP in 2020, again leading them to the NFC Championship, but losing in a 5-point game, where Rodgers targeted Davante Adams 4 times in their last 9 plays to try and win the game. Then the next season, Rodgers would win a 2nd MVP in a row and again lose in the playoffs in the 3rd straight game that they lost, with Davante Adams having 9 receptions. Aaron Jones was the 2nd leading receiver with 9 receptions of his own, and the 3rd leading receiver was Allen Lazard with 1 reception for 6 yards. For the Packers, despite the loss, it was hard to justify starting Love over Rodgers after 2 straight MVP seasons. So Jordan Love stayed on the bench for his 3rd straight season in 2022, only playing briefly throughout the season, going 14 for 21 with 195 yards and 1 touchdown in 4 different appearances. Now, after 3 seasons riding the bench, Love will become the Packers' starting quarterback. In the entirety of his NFL career, Love has thrown 83 pass attempts, completing 60% for 3 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. He looked great in 2022, but he looked rough in 2021, especially in his game against the Chiefs, where his family watched him from the worst seat in the house. Despite barely playing, there are huge expectations. The reason why I hammered in the whole Packers needed a wide receiver thing earlier is because this still hangs over Jordan Love's head to this day. That if the Packers had just taken T. Higgins there, they could have pushed past one of those 3 playoff games and won a Super Bowl. But not only does Love need to justify his first-round pedigree and the fact that he was selected instead of a more immediate team need, he also follows a long line of greatness at the Packers quarterback position. Brett Favre started for the Packers in 1992, marking 20 years straight in which the Packers had a Hall of Fame quarterback. Before Favre, they also had other Hall of Fame quarterbacks such as Arnie Herber, who I remember watching as a child in the 1930s, and Bart Starr. Between 1992 and 2022, the Packers have won 314 regular season games, which is the 2nd most in that time frame. The weight of the history of the franchise and its Hall of Famers, as well as the weight of his draft position and the weight of the context in which he was drafted in, are now put on Jordan Love's shoulders. Can he prove that he's the quarterback of the future and be the third consecutive Hall of Fame quarterback to be traded to the Jets at the end of his career after winning exactly one Super Bowl with the Packers? It's impossible to predict how he'll do. I like to use advanced stats in a lot of these, but we barely even seen him play, so there's nothing to look at. There's no doubt that the team's success in 2023, and maybe beyond that, hinges on Jordan Love. Some other interesting questions for the Packers include, why the fuck is Joe Barry still the defensive coordinator of this team? This pisses me off. Is the young wide receiver core going to break out? With Watson, Romeo Doubs, and Jaden Reed? What's going on with David Bakhtiari? Can Zach Tom keep up his surprising level of play? Can Quay Walker stop assaulting people who are not in pads? And if so, can he actually be good? Can Rudy Ford capitalize on a quality year? Can Devontae Wyatt make a larger impact this season? Who will start at safety for this team? And how will they deal with the loss of Big Bob Tunyon in the locker room? In 2020, the Eagles raised a lot of confusion amongst NFL fans when they selected Jalen Hurts in the second round, 53rd overall, following giving quarterback Carson Wentz a 4-year, $128 million extension, coming off a season in which Wentz started all 16 games and led the Eagles to a 9-7 season, winning the NFC East division. The next season, things would unravel for the Eagles, leading to the Eagles benching Wentz and starting Jalen Hurts, who performed only slightly better than Wentz, but still very bad. In 2020, Wentz had a negative 35.9% DVOA, which was 34th in the league, while Jalen Hurts had a negative 17.6% DVOA, which would have been 30th in the league if he qualified. Suffice it to say, both quarterbacks played below average, and Hurts didn't show much in several starts to inspire belief. However, the Eagles would stick with him for 2021, leading to lots of criticism. Hurts improved in 2021, completing 61% of his passes, throwing 16 touchdowns to 9 interceptions, having a passer rating of 87.2, improving his PFF grade to a 73.4, and ranking 17th in both DVOA and DR. But this is still average to slightly below average quarterback play, so it was debated going into 2022 whether Jalen Hurts could prove he was worth signing to a new contract, or whether the Eagles would move on to someone else after the season. But in 2022, Hurts would silence 2 full years of doubters.
A deep ball it is, and it is caught for the touchdown! A.J. Brown! Good protection for Jalen Hurts, who takes a shot, and he's got A.J. Brown! It's Hurts, it's a deep ball, looking for Devontae Smith, what a catch! Inside the 5! Second and 10, Hurts. We're trying the other side this time. Coming back together for the touchdown was Watkins.
Hurts would finish with an 88.2 overall PFF grade and an 83.8 PFF passing grade, ranking 4th overall in both categories. He was tied for the 3rd lowest interception percentage, 3rd highest in yards per attempt, 4th highest in passer rating, 10th in DVOA and DR, and led the Eagles to the Super Bowl, where he played a fantastic game and lost by 3 points. Jalen Hurts had gone from a guy whose job as a starter was questioned for 2 straight seasons, into a guy who finished 2nd in MVP votes, only behind Patrick Mahomes, who had an absolutely insane season. It's safe to say that most people didn't see this coming. After the season, Hurts signed a 5-year, $255 million contract extension, making him the highest paid player in the league at the time it was signed. I personally love Jalen Hurts as a player. He has a reputation as being one of the hardest working and highest character players in the league, which I think is a direct contributor to his success, and I think he's here to stay. But my personal opinion shouldn't influence what the biggest question is to the general public, and that is whether Hurts can do this again. From an objective perspective, Hurts was unable to solidify himself as a starter for 2 straight seasons, and his best season before this was a slightly below average season where they sneaked into the playoffs in a weak NFC and got blown out by the Buccaneers. It's not uncommon in the NFL to see outlier seasons from players, and now, after investing a ton of money into Hurts, the question is, going into 2023, whether Hurts will prove that their investment in him was the right one by showing that 2022 wasn't just a one-off season. In terms of other questions for the Eagles, they had a ton of turnover on their staff, losing both coordinators and in their players. Their linebacking core is completely new, replacing Kaiser White and TJ Edwards. But some other questions are whether they can revive Greedy Williams' career, who was a pickup I really liked for them, if Rashad Penny can stay healthy, what role DeAndre Swift will have on the team, if Bradbury and Slay can keep up their high level of play as they get older, and whether Cam Jurgens will move to guard. The Commanders are coming off a season in which their offense scored the 9th fewest points, had the 5th fewest yards per play, tied for 6th most turnovers, had the 5th lowest scoring percentage, and had the 7th worst weighted DVOA. Both Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke have left the team, leaving the team in the hands of Jake from State Farm, 2022 5th-round draft pick Sam Howell, or veteran journeyman Jacoby Brissett. The two main contenders to fulfill this Herculean task of improving this offense are Howell and Brissett. If you don't follow the Commanders very much, you might be asking why a 5th-round draft pick is even in the conversation. So let's talk about Howell for a second. In 2019, he was named ACC Rookie of the Year after throwing for 38 touchdowns to only 7 interceptions for UNC. The next year he improved, leading UNC to an 8-4 record, achieving a 92.3 PFF grade, completing about almost 69% of his passes, and throwing for 30 touchdowns to 7 interceptions. After the first 2 seasons, he was basically considered a lock in the first or second round. But in 2022, he took a huge step back, as UNC fell to 6-7, he'd throw for 24 touchdowns and 9 interceptions, his yards per attempt would drop almost a full 2 yards, and the perception of him as a player changed completely, as he'd rush 183 times for 828 yards and 11 touchdowns in 2021, compared to 2019 and 2020 combined, where he only had 181 rushing yards on 186 attempts, although keep in mind that college takes sacks into account in rushing yards. Either way, Howell fell to the 5th round, but he has shown potential in the past to be a high-level passer. In the NFL, Howell has only played in a single game, which was in 2022, completing 11 of 19 passes for 169 yards, 1 touchdown, and 1 interception. Jacoby Brissett, on the other hand, is coming off a successful season as Deshaun Watson's backup, where he actually outplayed Watson, finishing 7th in the league in DVOA and 14th in DR. But despite coming off a pretty good season, he's generally considered to just be an average starter to above average backup. So what else have the Commanders done to improve their abysmal offense from 2022? They brought in 2-time Super Bowl champion offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy from the Chiefs, who has a very impressive resume. Before becoming the Chiefs offensive coordinator, Bieniemy coached some of the greatest running backs in recent NFL history, such as Maurice Jones-Drew, Adrian Peterson, and Jamal Charles. He was promoted the Chiefs offensive coordinator in 2018 after the departure of Matt Nagy and has had a ton of success, ranking first in points scored twice, finishing in the top 5 4 times, and winning 2 Super Bowls. Just last season, in 2022, the Chiefs led the NFL in yards per game, passing yards, touchdowns, and points per game. But why, after 5 years of success, did Bieniemy take a lateral move to the Commanders to remain an offensive coordinator? Bieniemy received some hype as a coaching candidate several times over the years, interviewing with almost half of the teams in the league, but has not been offered a head coach position. The alleged reason, which I obviously cannot confirm because I have no personal knowledge of this, is twofold. First, there's mixed reviews on his performance in the interviews, and second, there's reportedly concerns that he didn't actually call plays for the Chiefs and was being carried by the play calling of Andy Reid and the elite play of Pat Mahomes. Although it is admittedly difficult to separate Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid from Eric Bieniemy, this has not stopped other coordinators before. But I won't really get into the merits of this argument because it opens up a whole can of worms beyond the scope of this video. Suffice it to say for now that taking this new opportunity for Bieniemy gives him the chance to leave no doubt. If he can succeed as the play caller for the Commanders, he'll be able to show beyond a reasonable doubt that he earned his success and he deserves a head coach position. So thus is the question for the Commanders. Can Bieniemy take a 5th round draft pick in Sam Howell or an average quarterback in Jacoby Brissett and elevate this offense to a playoff contender? The Commanders have a few other interesting questions in 2023, which include all of the Chase Young stuff, whether he'll be able to live up to his first round pedigree, whether he'll be able to stay on the team, and whether he'll show that he's worth a new contract on a team in which they're already paying their defensive line a lot of money. Can Jamin Davis live up to the first round draft pick? Are they changing their damn name again? How will new ownership affect the team? And is this Ron Rivera's last season with the team? Despite having elite players in wide receivers Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and tackle Tristan Wirfs, the Buccaneers offense is no doubt their biggest question coming into the year. After the retirement of Tom Brady, the Buccaneers have the option of replacing him with 2021 second-rounder Kyle Trask or former number 1 overall pick Baker Mayfield. Trask has barely seen any time in the NFL in 2 seasons, only appearing in a single game against the Atlanta Falcons, where he went 3 for 9 for 23 yards and had a QBR of 1.6. Mayfield has had an interesting journey to this point that I won't delve too deep into, but 2022 was not a good season for him. Despite that awesome comeback he had on Thursday Night Football, Mayfield had a negative 21.3 DVOA, which is third worst in the league, a negative 328 DR, again third worst, a 60% completion rate, second worst in the league, a QBR of 24.5, worst in the league, a 9.7 sack percentage, third worst in the league, 5.25 net yards per attempt, third worst in the league, and a 50.6 PFF grade, which ranked 37th of 39 quarterbacks. Based on what we saw from both quarterbacks in 2022, the Buccaneers are in a lose-lose situation. So this is the question they face in 2023. Who is their starting quarterback? And whoever it is, can they play well enough to allow the rest of the elite talent on the team to carry them to the playoffs? Some other questions for the Bucs going into 2023 are whether Todd Bowles will still be the head coach after this season, whether Joe Tryon-Shoyinka is going to be able to take the next step, whether they can fix a mostly bad offensive line, and there's a question about what their new offense will look like and how well they'll do under new offensive coordinator Dave Canales. The Panthers are a team with a lot of young talent. Besides the obvious and Bryce Young, the Panthers have Terrence Marshall, DJ Chark, Ika Mekwonu, Frankie Luvu, Brian Burns, Derek Brown, Jeremy Chin, Jonathan Mingo, JC Horn, and Bumper Pool. Okay, Bumper Pool doesn't count, but I love his name. It sounds like I'm playing bumper cars in the pool. Doesn't that sound super fun? Let's group these players into a few categories and discuss the key young contributors to this team. First, we have the stars. These are guys who have already shown their key pieces on the team, and there's only one of them. This is Brian Burns. After 4 seasons, he already has 2 Pro Bowl appearances. Burns is seen as so much of a contributor that the Rams reportedly offered 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick for Burns during the 2022 season, which is insane to think. But the Panthers said no, wanting to keep him on the team. This guy's play speaks for itself, so I don't really have to say much more. But let's go into the next category, and these are guys looking to add on to a great year. This is for guys who have played like a star for 1 season and could maybe solidify themselves as a star if they continue their high level of play. JC Horn is the obvious first. After only playing 3 games in his rookie season, Horn came back in 2022 and earned a 73.2 PFF coverage grade, which ranked 27th in the league. Horn allowed the second lowest passer rating against him, right behind James Bradbury, with a 52.6. He was targeted at the second lowest rate, only being targeted every 9 coverage snaps, and he had the 5th lowest rate of completion, allowing a reception once every 15.1 coverage snaps. We only have a 1-year sample size, so it's a bit early to call him a star, but if he plays like this again, he'll easily be there. And next we'll go to Frankie Luvu, who after 4 seasons in the NFL where he was unable to break into a starting lineup, he finally broke out in a big way in 2022, being named the starter for 14 of his 15 games. Luvu's PFF grade of 74.8 placed him as the 16th best linebacker in 2022. His run D grade of 90.1 was 3rd highest, and his pass rush grade of 72.2 was 11th highest. Luvu struggled in coverage as he allowed a 119.9 passer rating against him, which is the 3rd lowest amongst linebackers with over 400 snaps in coverage. But despite his flaws in coverage, he still had a great season, and Luvu could potentially become one of the best linebackers in the game if he can improve upon his coverage skills while retaining his high level of play in other areas. The next guy we'll discuss is former number 7 overall pick Derek Brown, who had a huge year in 2022 after a slow start to his career. His 84.4 PFF grade ranked 7th of 127 interior defensive linemen. His 80.6 run D grade was 3rd, and his pass rush grade of 77.9 was 12th. Of interior defensive linemen with more than 375 pass rush snaps, Brown ranked 13th in pass rush win rate, 13th in QB hits, and 11th in hurries. With these numbers, you'd think that you're surprised to not hear about this guy, but it makes sense. He struggles to convert his pressure into sacks, which is borne out in the fact that he only managed 1 sack last year. But he's still making a large impact on the game and helping to create pressure on the quarterback and helping other guys on the team to clean up. If he can continue his play from last year in both run and pass D, he'll no doubt be a star. And lastly in this category, we have Jeremy Chin, who finished 2nd in Defensive Rookie of the Year voting after a solid rookie campaign and followed it up with another great year in which he ranked 22nd of 92 available safeties. In 2022, Chin took a pretty big step back, ranking 74th of 88, having a run D grade of 43.2, which ranked 80th of 82 safeties, and having a coverage grade of 58, ranking 66th of 87 safeties. Chin has the potential to be a key contributor and has played like it before, and it's possible that Ejiro Evero, the new defensive coordinator, will return him to form in 2022. But alongside these guys, there are some other breakout candidates, such as Terrace Marshall, DJ Chark, and Ika Mekwonu. I'd actually like to go a bit more in depth for these guys, but this Panthers segment is running a bit long for non-Panthers fans, I'd imagine, so I will try to speed it up. Essentially, these guys haven't had any above-average seasons in the NFL quite yet, but they've shown flashes of talent to be great, and 2023 could potentially be their big breakout year. And then lastly, we have the rookies, Jonathan Mingo and Bryce Young, who I've talked about outside of this video, so they don't need much discussion. But outside of all the guys we've talked about, the Panthers really don't have much premium talent besides Von Bell and Shaq Thompson. Miles Sanders is an average running back, Hayden Hurst is an alright tight end, Thielen is getting up there in age and he's a good veteran presence, but I don't really know how much he's going to provide to this receiving core. This is basically to say that the young core will be tasked with carrying this Panthers team, which is why this is their most important question. Will their young core be able to bring them to the playoffs? Some other questions facing the Panthers in 2023 are, will CJ Henderson ever live up to his draft status? Will this coaching staff of Reich and Ejiro Evero be as good as everyone thinks? How much of an impact will Von Bell make? Will Miles Sanders be more than just an average running back? Is Adam Thielen completely washed? Is this wide receiver core going to be enough to support their young quarterback? And can Laviska Shenault be a contributor? After trading away Russell Wilson, the Seahawks appeared to be in a rebuilding mode. Going into 2022, the Seahawks win total was set at 5.5, and most predictions had them between 4 and 6 wins. It wasn't even known who would be the starting quarterback. Pete Carroll spent the offseason raving about quarterback Drew Lock. But in week 1, the world was shocked, as Geno Smith led the Seahawks to a 17-16 win over the Broncos and former quarterback Russell Wilson, going 23 for 28 with 195 yards and 2 touchdowns, leading to his now famous line.
Yeah, they wrote me off. I ain't right back, though.
Geno Smith, a former second-round pick who is most famous for getting punched in the jaw rather than doing anything on the football field, finally had his moment after years and years of below-average starter play or sitting behind other quarterbacks. But it wasn't just limited to one moment. Geno Smith would end the season 12th overall in DVOA, 9th in DR, 1st in completion percentage, 8th in yards, 4th in touchdowns, 7th best in interception percentage, and 5th best in passer rating, leading the Seahawks to a 9-8 record and a playoff berth. Geno Smith, who was ranked the 34th and 32nd best quarterback in 2013 and 2014 by PFF, was now ranked the 9th best quarterback by PFF in 2022. Geno had looked slightly improved in 2021 when filling in for Russell Wilson in a 4-game stretch in which he had a negative 3.2 DVOA, but nobody expected a top 10 quarterback performance from Geno in his age 32 season. After the season, Geno and the Seahawks agreed to a pretty team-friendly contract for 3 years at an average value of $25 million per year, putting him as the 17th highest paid quarterback. But despite all of this, Geno Smith will be 33 in October and has only had 1 season of top-end quarterback play. Additionally, Geno suffered a slight regression in the back end of the 2022 season. As you can see here, Geno averaged a 72.1 PFF passing grade from weeks 1 to week 10, but his average PFF passing grade fell off almost 11 full points to a 61.6 from weeks 12 to 18. In weeks 1 through 10, Geno completed almost 73% of his passes, had 17 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions, had a passer rating of 108, and had an adjusted yards gained per attempt of 8.34. Most of these numbers got worse after the bye week, except his touchdowns per game, which increased from 1.7 to 1.9. But Geno's completion percentage dropped to a 66%. He threw for 3 more interceptions in 3 less games, had a passer rating of 92.1, and adjusted yards per attempt of 6.85. This doesn't necessarily prove that Geno can't be a starter. In fact, they prove the opposite, as Geno still played at the level of an average starter. For example, the 66% completion rate and the 92.1 passer rating both would have still been 15th best in the NFL. But what these numbers do suggest is that Geno is only a league average quarterback who just started off the season really hot. His age and regression at the back end of 2022 raised multiple questions for the upcoming season. Is he the real deal? Is he actually a top 10 quarterback like he showed in the beginning of 2022? Will he regress to an average quarterback, or even worse, regress to his old form as a below average quarterback? With playmakers such as Jackson Smith-Njigba, DK Metcalf, and Tyler Lockett, I feel like it's highly unlikely he'll completely fall off. But whether Geno can play like early 2022 Geno is a big question that may dictate the success of the team in 2023. Some other questions for the Seahawks in 2023 include, is the defensive line actually fixed? Can Jamal Adams return to his previous form? Can Tariq Woolen continue his high level of play? Why are there so many players with names of dead celebrities on this team? Will Devin Bush prove that he's worth his new contract? Can Charles Cross take a step up after an okay rookie season? And can Noah Fant have a breakout season and live up to the potential that was once seen in him? This one is kind of two questions in one, but you'll see why in a second. Let's first focus on Kyle Pitts. Pitts was drafted 4th overall by the Atlanta Falcons and was hailed as a unicorn-type player who would be an immediate difference maker on the offense. He showed this rare talent in his rookie year as he became only the second rookie tight end to surpass 1,000 receiving yards, had the 3rd most receptions in a rookie season for a tight end, was the first rookie tight end to make the Pro Bowl since Jeremy Shockey in 2002, was named to the 2021 PFWA All-Rookie team, and was ranked as the 91st best player in the NFL going into 2022. However, his second season would be extremely disappointing, as he started 10 games before suffering an MCL tear to end the season. In those 10 games, Pitts managed 28 receptions for 356 yards and 2 touchdowns, leading to an average per game of 2.8 receptions and 35.6 yards per game. This lack of production would lead to a lot of criticism of Arthur Smith for failing to use Pitts, leading to his famous line of, "It's not fantasy football, we're just trying to win." As if these things are mutually exclusive and scheming up touches for your uniquely talented tight end will somehow cause you to have less of a chance to win? Now here's something you'll be surprised to know. In 2022, Kyle Pitts actually had the 5th highest target share of any wide receiver, getting targeted on 28.5% of his routes run. So why isn't he getting yards and why is he screwing my fantasy team? 2 reasons. First, the Falcons hate throwing the ball. Marcus Mariota averaged 23.1 passes per game and attempted 30 passes just once in a game where Pitts played. This is borne out best in their game against the Bengals, where despite being down by 3 scores for the majority of the game, the Falcons threw the ball a whopping 13 times for 124 yards. Pitts managed 3 receptions for 9 yards, so he technically caught almost half of the passes complete to Falcons receivers. Alongside their hesitancy to throw, when they did throw, it wasn't pretty. I've seen a bunch of different numbers floating around and I'm unable to find a consistent number, but the general consensus is that between only 59% to 63% of Pitts' targets were catchable. For context, league average for tight ends is 79%, and either number would put Pitts at number 1 in the league for lowest percentage of catchable targets. But how does this change? Well, for one, throw the ball more, and for 2, if you're not going to throw the ball more, scheme up screenplays or something so he can get the ball on his hands. However, another way to fix this is better quarterback play, which segues us into the next question for the Falcons. How will Desmond Ridder look? The Falcons had options to move on from him and even brought in Taylor Heineke as a backup, but they seem content to start Ridder. The Falcons are surprisingly loaded at the skill positions with Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Cordero Patterson, Jonnu Smith, and Eagles legend JJ Arcega-Whiteside. However, they entrusted this young core to Desmond Ridder, a 2022 third-round draft pick who spent the majority of his first season on the bench behind one of the worst passing quarterbacks in the league before coming in for the final 4 games and improving in each start. With Ridder at the helm, the Falcons averaged over 30 pass attempts per game, which means that if Ridder can play at an at least average level, and Pitts retains his target share, Pitts will go off, which will also make the Ridder experiment work better as well. However, the opposite is also true. If Ridder can't get it to work, and the Falcons run the ball every play, Pitts and London will likely not see much work. Therefore, this is a dual question for the Falcons. Can Desmond Ridder improve to become an average to quality starter? And can the Falcons utilize Kyle Pitts' skill set to help them win games? Some other important questions for the Falcons include, can Chris Lindstrom live up to his new contract? What happens to Tyler Algier after drafting Bijan? Can Jeff Okudah turn around his career in Atlanta? Did they ever find the guy who stole Younghoe Koo's cleats? David Onyemata. There's no question, I just wanted to say it because I think it sounds like someone saying on your mother, and it's funny to me. Can Arnold Ebiketie take a step up in his second season? How big of an impact will Jesse Bates make? And lastly, can AJ Terrell bounce back from a rough third season after being dominant in his sophomore year? After Drew Brees retired after 2020, the team has been stuck in a holding pattern of sorts. They've tried out Trevor Siemian, Jameis Winston, Taysom Hill, Ian Book, and Andy Dalton. Many of them played what one could only describe as fine. Despite this revolving door of quarterbacks, the Saints have somehow remained an average team, finishing 2021 with a 9-8 record and taking a small step back in 2022, finishing 7-10. This has mostly been on the back of their defense, which was 4th in weighted DVOA in 2022 and 2nd in weighted DVOA in 2021. In 22, they allowed the 9th least points, the 6th least yards, 5th least yards per play, had the 5th most sacks, and were 10th in EPA per play. But their offensive performance was just not enough to capitalize, as they ended 22nd in points scored, had the 7th worst scoring percentage, had the 5th highest turnover percentage, and were 23rd in DVOA. So the Saints finally had enough this offseason and brought in Derek Carr on a 4-year, $150 million contract, which puts him as the 13th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. In theory, this is a really good idea. Carr has played at a high level in the past, as he was tied for 3rd in MVP votes after a fantastic season cut short by injury in 2016, and a stretch from 2019 to 2021, whereas PFF grades had him ranked as the 11th best quarterback, 10th best quarterback, and then 13th best quarterback. Additionally, Carr has never played with a defense that ranked better than 20th in the league in points allowed per game, with the best defense he played with being in 2016 and 2017, where the defense ranked exactly 20th. So, in a weak NFC with an above-average quarterback joined together with a top 5 defense, that should be end of story, right? Not exactly. In 2022, Carr took a pretty large step back and was actually worse than the Saints starter in 2022 than Andy Dalton, even with Devontae Adams as his wide receiver 1. Additionally, there's kind of a weird stat floating around, but it's 30 games, so it's kind of a large enough sample size. Derek Carr has only won 60% of his games when the Raiders allowed under 20 points, which is far below the league average of 82.8% when the defense allows less than 20 points. A comment on the post that I got this from hypothesized that Carr is just afraid of a really good defense, and that's why he's never played with one, and why when he plays with one, he cannot win. I don't know how true this is, but does this mean anything? No. The point of showing this statistic isn't to sway you in either direction, but it's meant just to give context as to why it's a question. Obviously, if Carr were indisputably amazing, we wouldn't have to worry about it, but that's not the case, as Carr struggled last year and has been inconsistent, showing top-tier play at times and below-average play at other times. Ultimately, the big question facing the Saints this season is whether Carr can return to form in 2023 and lead the Saints to the playoffs. Other questions facing the Saints in 2023: can Chris Olave pick up where he left off after year 1? Will Michael Thomas actually play? And if he does, will it be for the Saints? And will he look like himself? Will Rashid Shaheed continue to be a big part of the Saints offense? Can their interior offensive line step up? Will Cesar Ruiz live up to the first round pick and earn a new contract? Can Jawan Johnson have a breakout year? Will Paulson Adebo remain in the starting lineup? Can Marshawn Lattimore return to top 15 status? How much longer can Demario Davis perform as a top 5 linebacker at almost 35 years old? Can Carl Granderson continue to play at a high level? Will Cam Jordan have a steep drop-off in play at 34 years old? Will Peyton Turner, a former first-round draft pick, crack the starting lineup? And can they please start Smoke Monday? It's just such an awesome name. After 4 seasons at offensive coordinator for the Cowboys, Kellen Moore and the Cowboys parted ways. The offense will now be in the hands of offensive coordinator Brian Schottenheimer and head coach Mike McCarthy, with McCarthy making the play calls on Sundays. He'll have rather large expectations in year 1, as the Cowboys are coming off a season in which they were 10th in total yards, 7th in scoring percentage, and 3rd in points scored, even while playing with their backup quarterback for a stretch of the season. McCarthy is implementing a system he dubbed as the Texas Coast offense, which is a combination of Kellen Moore's previous offense with the West Coast system that McCarthy ran in Green Bay. Fans so far have not been particularly excited about this idea, as the last thing they remember about McCarthy's offense in Green Bay was that practically every play was a slant, and Aaron Rodgers would make up his own plays and even use hand signals to change the plays without telling the coaches what they meant. But it doesn't look all that bleak. In the 12 seasons in which McCarthy called plays in Green Bay, his offense finished 11th or better in 10 of them, including 6 years in the top 5. But the counter-argument is often made that much of this success is attributable to Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers, and that his method of play calling is now outdated and won't work in the modern NFL. McCarthy made doubters look even better when he recently stated he wants to run the damn ball, which, as you can see from my very thoroughly researched video on running backs, it's not the best approach to winning in the modern NFL. Despite the concerns, reports from camps have been positive regarding the offense, but the question is how McCarthy's play calling will affect the Cowboys on the field. Although they can consistently be a good team and get into the playoffs, the Cowboys have not been able to get over the hump. They've lost 7 straight divisional round games and have not made the NFC Championship game since the 1995 NFL season. In fact, they're 5-12 in the playoffs since they won the Super Bowl in that 1995 season. Ironically, this is the same problem McCarthy faced in Green Bay, where despite finishing with a winning record in 6 straight seasons following his 1 Super Bowl win with the Packers, McCarthy's team would go 5-6 in the playoffs, losing in the divisional round 3 times, the NFC Championship game twice, and losing in the wild card game once. And now the legacy seems to continue for both parties, as McCarthy has gotten the Cowboys to the playoffs 2 seasons in a row and has lost in the wild card game and then the divisional game. But there arises the biggest question for this season. Will the change to McCarthy as play caller break the spell of both McCarthy himself and the Cowboys of recent playoff mediocrity? Or will this change finally get them over the edge and into the Super Bowl for Jerry? Other questions for the Cowboys include, can Dak play at a consistently high level instead of fluctuating back and forth between every damn game? How will Tony Pollard recover from his injury? Can Brandon Cooks retain his 1,000-yard streak? Will CeeDee Lamb move into the elite tier of wide receivers? Can Tyler Smith improve upon a good rookie season? How creative would the offense get with using Hunter Luepke? Can Michael Gallup return to form? Will their tight end room suffer from the loss of Dalton Schultz? Can Stephon Gilmore continue to play at an elite level as he gets older? Can Tyron Smith return to being a top 10 tackle? And will Leighton Vander Esch return to his rookie form where he looked to be one of the best linebackers in the league, but has since fell off? In the 2 seasons prior to 2022, Daniel Jones had only thrown 21 touchdown passes against 17 interceptions, missed 8 games due to injury, and averaged a DR and DVOA of 29th in the league. This led to the Giants declining to exercise the 5th-year option going into the 2022 season. After finishing 4-13 in 2021, most people expected that the Giants would not be very good in 2022, and it was speculated that Jones would no longer be on the Giants once the upcoming season was over. However, the exact opposite happened. The Giants were one of the most shocking teams in 2022, going 9-7-1, making the playoffs and even winning a playoff game against the 13-4 Minnesota Vikings. Jones would finish with the 5th highest completion percentage, the lowest interception percentage, 15 touchdowns to only 5 interceptions, the 7th highest QBR, the 13th highest passer rating, and 708 rushing yards, which was almost double his previous career high. After this breakout season, the Giants would eventually agree with Jones to a 4-year deal of $160 million, averaging $40 million per year, placing him as the 11th highest paid quarterback in the NFL. But advanced metrics and film paint a pretty concerning picture for Daniel Jones and the Giants. In 2022, Jones finished 18th in DR and 20th in DVOA, which is better than where he had been, but still below average. He finished with a 70 PFF passing grade, which was 19th in the NFL, the 2nd lowest big-time throw rate among qualifying quarterbacks, the lowest average depth of target, and he had the 2nd highest time to throw. The Giants offense ran the 7th most RPOs and the 3rd most play-action plays. Jones was 24th in yards per attempt, throwing the ball under 10 yards on 65% of his passing attempts. He had the 12th most passing yards gained from receivers running after the catch, and he had only 1 touchdown to 5 interceptions when throwing in the intermediate portion of the field. These advanced metrics paint the picture that Jones didn't really elevate his play in 2022, just that he was able to execute the plan. Daniel Jones was able to lead the Giants to the playoffs last season by completing schemed-up short passes, RPOs, play-action boots, slants, and crossers by putting the ball in the receiver's hands and letting them work after the catch. Now, let's get this straight. It isn't an inherently bad thing, nor is it easy to put the ball consistently on target, even on short throws. It's a very good thing, obviously, for an NFL quarterback to be able to execute plays as they're drawn up. Look at Zach Wilson. He can't even fucking complete a normal pass under 10 yards. However, many quarterbacks who get to the NFL level, not Zach Wilson, are able to not throw interceptions and complete a large amount of their passes when the majority of their passes are under 10 yards and are schemed up concepts. A player who does these things is not worth the 11th highest quarterback salary in the league, even if it's a great thing to be able to execute the scheme. A player who makes top tier position money needs to play in a way that elevates their team's success and be a win because of player, not a win with player. These stats paint the picture that Jones is still an average quarterback who is a win with player, that is now getting paid top tier quarterback money for the next 4 seasons. Alongside these stats, there are also many times on film where it's evident that Jones clearly passes up wide open deep passes for safer underneath passes or runs for just a few yards, sacrificing the offense's ability to score for no reason other than either not looking or not being confident enough. Brett Coleman actually discusses the Giants passing game in depth around 14 minutes into an awesome video that I linked below. He discusses a lot of these issues if you'd like to see it for yourself or if you don't believe me. I think it's definitely worth the watch because it's not something I even really noticed when watching Jones until Brett drew my attention to it, and it's not something you can see from the broadcast angles either. When you're watching the game as a fan, you're not scouting a player's mechanics, you're not really watching where their eyes are going, and you also are physically unable to see where the receivers are down the field or what concepts are being ran, unless you're taking the time after the game to look at the all 22. And Brett has done that, and he's provided some great analysis, so I think that you guys should watch it before you get really pissed at me, because it just shows in the film. It brings about this huge question for the Giants. Can Daniel Jones prove that he was worth this contract extension and prove that he deserves $40 million per year? Can he show that he's a player that elevates the talent around him? Brian Daboll is my favorite head coach in the NFL, and I think Daboll, paired with Daniel Jones' toughness and work ethic, could potentially make this happen. But for right now, it's still a question heading into 2023. Some other questions facing the Giants in 2023 are if they'll be able to continue the success they had last season, if Darren Waller can stay healthy and return to form, if they've done enough to add to their passing game, how Bobby Okereke will do, whether Saquon will remain on the team and remain a consistent high-level running back, whether Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins can prove that they belong in the starting lineup, can Paris Campbell stay healthy, can Evan Neal take a step up from his rookie season, in which he was 80th out of 81 tackles? Will Wan'Dale Robinson have a larger role in the offense this season? Can Kayvon Thibodeau improve upon a good rookie season? Is their linebacking core still going to be terrible? Will Sterling Shepard stay healthy and make an impact on the team? And lastly, can Sexy Dexy, Dexter Lawrence, remain top 2 in the league at both pass rushing and run defense? Since 2018, the Minnesota Vikings are 46-35-1, making the playoffs 2 times and losing in the wildcard round once and the divisional round once. From 2013 to 2018, the Minnesota Vikings were 44-35-1, making the playoffs twice, losing in the wildcard round once and the conference final once. From 2008 to 2012, the Minnesota Vikings were 41-39, making the playoffs 3 times, losing in the wildcard round twice and the conference final once. From 2003 to 2007, the Minnesota Vikings were 40-40, making the playoffs once and losing in the divisional round. It doesn't end! The Vikings just keep reliving the same 5 years over and over again with small variances just to keep you interested. In these last 20 years, the Vikings finished with an average or above average win percentage in 13 of those seasons. In the other 7 seasons that are not included in that, their records were 8-9, 7-9 twice, 6-10 3 times, 5-10-1, 5-11, and 3-13. Every single year, the Vikings are a fringe playoff team, being just good enough to barely make the playoffs or barely miss the playoffs, with some varying swings working for or against them. They're never a clear Super Bowl contender, but they're never a clear contender for a top 5 pick either. They just hover in purgatory forever and ever and ever, reliving the same 5 years over and over again. Now, after 5 seasons of Kirk O'Chains, they've just repeated exactly what they've been doing, being good enough to barely miss the playoffs or make the playoffs and lose early. Cousins is 34 years old, and he apparently has an indent built into the wall to hold his Super Bowl trophy. But to win that trophy, the Vikings need to be something more than purely good. They need to actually take a step up and move themselves into actual contender status. They have the best young wide receiver in the league. They have an above average quarterback. They brought in Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson. They have a great offensive line, besides Ed Ingram. They brought in Marcus Davenport. Danielle Hunter and Lewis Cine are coming back from injury. They also added an outstanding coach in Brian Flores to run their defense. Can this finally be the year they break their routine of good and move into being great? Can this be the year they move out of purgatory? Or will this just be another fringe playoff season where they're good enough to sell tickets and make money, but not good enough to win the dance? Maybe these changes signal yes. Wait, who are their cornerbacks? Oh, never mind. Some other questions for the Vikings include, will Josh Oliver live up to his new contract? Who will take over Thielen's number 2 role? Addison? Osborne? Or will Hawkinson be the second in receiving targets? Again, who the fuck is playing quarterback for this team? Will Marcus Davenport play well on his 1-year deal? Will their defensive line suffer with the loss of Dalvin Tomlinson? Can Cam Bynum have a bounce-back season? Will Andre Carter see the field for a single snap? And can Andrew Booth improve upon a season in which he didn't play very well and he only played 2 games, so he's coming back from injury and not really great performance? Going into 2022, the Bears' starting wide receivers were Equanimeous St. Brown, Byron Pringle, and Darnell Mooney. Safe to say, this is a terrible receiving core, and NFL fans were surprised that the Bears had brought in no new talent to support their young quarterback, Justin Fields. In fact, because this was the first year of the new GM Ryan Poles' tenure, many speculated that the Bears were setting up Fields to fail so the new regime could just move on from him and pick their own guy. It was still yet to be known whether Fields was the real deal, and his play in the first 4 weeks of 2022 did not at all help his case. Fields had a 58.7 passer rating, barely completing 50% of his throws. He had a 49.7 PFF grade, 2 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. He was barely averaging over 150 yards per game, and he was sacked 16 times for an average of 4 times per game. However, all of a sudden, Fields began to pick up some steam. In the next 5 games, Fields would have 8 touchdowns and 2 interceptions, 170 yards per game, a 99.7 quarterback rating, an adjusted completion percentage of 70%, and he increased his PFF grade almost 30 points to 77.4. What could explain this sudden increase? The Bears started to utilize Fields' rushing ability, increasing his rushing from 37 yards per game in the first 4 weeks to 91 yards per game over the next 5. After week 9, Fields would slightly cool down, averaging 153 yards per game, a quarterback rating of 85.4, throwing for 7 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, and continuing his average of about 90 yards per game on the ground. Fields' performance appeared to be enough to create confidence in him from the higher-ups, as the Bears passed on the opportunity to draft Bryce Young in order to keep Fields, and they've surrounded him with a ton more talent this year. But a few questions arise from Fields' performance. Can he find a balance between rushing and passing? And can he develop as a passer? Ideally, Fields will find a sweet spot similar to Lamar Jackson, where his rushing ability creates opportunities in the passing game, and where he's a good enough passer to take advantage of those opportunities. But this was not true in 2022, as Fields only managed a PFF passing grade of 54.4, which was 31st of 34 qualifying quarterbacks. He also finished last in both DR with a negative 541 and DVOA with a negative 34.5%. And not counting weeks 1 through 4, which would make these averages look even worse, but Fields was still unable to average more than 161 yards per game and took 39 sacks, which equals 3.5 per game. But he did show that he's an elite rusher. His rushing grade was a crazy 91.5, which is 3rd among 8 qualifying quarterbacks. Another question that arises from his supposed breakout is whether this playstyle is sustainable and whether it will lead to wins. As even though people claim Fields had a breakout season, the Bears still went 3-14, with 2 of those wins ironically coming in weeks 1 through 4, when he was playing at his worst. There's of course the issue of taking more hits when running the ball and his lingering problem from college of holding onto the ball in the pocket too long, leading to getting sacked a lot, which also creates injury concerns. These are definitely concerning, and that's why it's necessary to ask whether Fields will develop as a passer and whether he'll prove that he's truly the quarterback of the Bears' future. The Bears have added a ton of new weapons like running back Roschon Johnson, Pro Bowl wide receiver DJ Moore, rookie wide receiver Tyler Scott, and future Hall of Famer Big Bob Tonyan. They've also upgraded their defense, although it's still not very good, but they've upgraded it. So 2023 is time for Fields to prove that he could step up his passing game enough to show that he's the quarterback of the future for the Bears. Here's some other big questions for the Bears in 2023. Can DJ Moore reach his ceiling with Justin Fields after he's been held back by terrible quarterback play for a long time? Who's the starting running back? Deontay Foreman, Khalil Herbert, Roschon Johnson? Can the rookies save this atrocious defensive line? Will Chase Claypool provide enough value to make their trade from last season worth it? Will Cole Kmet reach his potential, or will he remain just an average tight end? Will Tremaine Edmonds be worth the money and the fact that they got rid of Roquan Smith for him? Is Tevin Jenkins here to stay? Can 5th rounder Braxton Jones retain top 20 tackle play? Can TJ Edwards remain an above average linebacker? And will Velus Jones improve upon a mediocre rookie season? Elite talent surrounds the 49ers. Christian McCaffrey, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Trent Williams, Brandon Ayuk, Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, Dre Greenlaw, Javon Hargrave, and head coach Kyle Shanahan. It's seriously insane how many elite players are on this team. But, as is so often the case with the 49ers, their ability to win in 2023 is held back by 2 things: injuries and quarterback play. Before the 2023 season, it was usually a mixture of both issues with Jimmy Garoppolo, and even without him, the same problem continues. But this time, there's a new level of intrigue as the 49ers have 3 different options at quarterback coming into the 2023 season: Trey Lance, Brock Purdy, or Sam Darnold. Let's give a brief overview of each. In 2021, the 49ers sent 3 first-round draft picks and a third-round pick in order to move up to number 3 to select Trey Lance, a quarterback out of North Dakota State with tons of athletic upside, but only 318 pass attempts in his collegiate career. For reference, Bryce Young threw 548 times in 2021, over 200 more attempts than Trey Lance had in the entirety of his collegiate career, and more than Lance has at this point in his career. The idea for picking Lance was to pair him with Kyle Shanahan to allow Shanahan to become even more creative in his play calling by utilizing the rare tools of Lance. In theory, the 49ers could utilize Lance's ability as a rusher, making passing opportunities easier, while also developing Lance's fundamentals as a passer to create one of the league's most dangerous offenses on the ground and in the air. In his rookie season, Lance would be the second-string quarterback to Jimmy Garoppolo, only replacing him on a few occasions due to injury. He'd finished that season with 2 games started, going 41 for 71, a 57.7% completion rate, with 603 yards, 5 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and 38 carries for 168 yards and a rushing touchdown. In 2022, Lance was named the starter over Jimmy G and had a very rough week 1 in some disgusting weather conditions, completing only 47% of his passes with 164 yards and an interception on 28 attempts. But the next week, we finally got a chance to get a gauge on how good Lance was. The weather was good, he was starting a game, he was in his second season, so now we could finally tell if he was going to be the quarterback that everyone imagined. And how did he do? He threw 3 passes, then suffered a season-ending ankle injury. So all in all, Lance is going into his 3rd season having only thrown 420 passes in the last 6 years of play. But the allure of what the Niners offense could be with Lance is still very intriguing. Big Brock was Mr. Irrelevant in 2022, being picked in the 7th round at 262 overall. He came into the 2022 season as the 3rd-string quarterback, and he saw limited action until Week 12 against the Miami Dolphins. He'd immediately take the NFL by storm, completing 68% of his passes for 210 yards and throwing for 2 touchdowns to 1 interception. The next week, he'd play against legendary quarterback Tom Brady and the Buccaneers, and he led the Niners to a 35-7 beatdown win, completing 76% of his passes for 185 yards and 2 touchdowns. Purdy became the first quarterback since Kurt Warner to win his first 3 NFL starts and throw 2 or more touchdown passes in each game. And he'd finished the season with a completion percentage of 67%, 13 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions, and a record of 5-0 as the team's starting quarterback. Arguably 6-0 since he came in pretty early in the win against the Dolphins. He finished the season with the 13th best quarterback PFF grade, and he was also heavily argued to win Rookie of the Year, but obviously he didn't because he only played in 6 games. But Purdy's magic didn't stop in the regular season, as he would win 2 straight playoff games against the Seahawks and the Cowboys, throwing for 3 touchdowns and no interceptions. But the legacy of the 49 IR struck yet again, as in the very first quarter of the NFC Championship game, on his 3rd pass attempt after starting 2 for 2, Purdy suffered a UCL injury and wasn't able to throw the ball for more than 10 yards. So now, multiple questions pop up for Purdy in 2023. First, will he be the same after his injury? He had surgery in March and is on a pitch count in training camp, but we also don't know if he'll be able to throw the ball with the same velocity and distance as he could before, which is a significant detriment to a quarterback who already was below average in both of those categories when he was completely healthy. There's also the issue of upside in general, as 70% of his pass attempts were under 10 yards. He doesn't have a ton of athletic upside, and he was a late-round pick. Lastly, there's the issue of sample size, as he only played in 6 games, so it's unknown whether he can sustain that level of play over the course of an entire season. Like Trey Lance, Darnold was picked 3rd overall, but he was selected by the Jets in 2018. Over his career, Darnold has shown flashes of great play every once in a while, but has mostly been a very bad quarterback. Darnold only played 6 games in 2022, averaging a completion percentage of 58.6 and throwing for 7 touchdowns to 3 interceptions. Looking at 2021, because it's a larger sample size, Darnold finished 2nd to last right in front of Zach Wilson in DVOA and DR. The Jets really know how to pick him. His career completion percentage is below 60%, and his best season was his rookie season, in which he finished as the 29th best quarterback in the league, according to PFF. But Darnold was picked number 3 for a reason. He was seen at worst as a solid starter, with a high ceiling due to his mobility, his ability to read the field, his arm talent, and mental toughness. As we've just discussed, Darnold never quite met those expectations, but it's also a fair argument to say that he's never been in a situation quite like the 49ers. Darnold's head coaches with the Jets were Todd Bowles and Adam Gase. In his 3 years, PFF ranked the Jets' offensive line's pass blocking as 12th worst, 5th worst, then 2nd worst. His wide receivers with the Jets were Braxton Berrios, Lawrence Cager, Jamison Crowder, Denzel Mims, Rashad Perriman, Jeff Smith, and Vincent Smith. In Carolina, Darnold worked under head coach Matt Rule, who was fired in 2022, and passed behind an offensive line that was 5th worst in 2021 when he made most of his starts, but they improved to 11th best in 2022, where he played less games. So, the argument can be made that Darnold has gotten the bad end of the stick and that he still has a ton of upside. I'm not here to make that decision, but the point is that many believe Darnold can meet the potential that draft analysts once saw in him by working with Kyle Shanahan, a coach who is infamous for making the game easy on his quarterbacks and for winning with average quarterbacks. In fact, the Niners are the third team in NFL history to reach 3 conference championship games in a 4-season span without a quarterback making the Pro Bowl. So, in a tenure that has been defined by injuries, average quarterback play, and injuries to average quarterbacks, there's now a choice of 3 guys for the 49ers. Trey Lance, a player who the 49ers spent tons of draft capital on and has a ton of raw talent, but is very inexperienced, coming off an injury, and hasn't showed anything on the NFL level to spark belief. Brock Purdy, a player 1 pick away from being an undrafted free agent, who has a low ceiling due to limited tools, has a very small sample size of good play in the NFL, and is coming off a UCL injury. Or Sam Darnold, another highly drafted player who once showed lots of great potential, but has never been able to string together high-level play for long enough to make a team believe in him as their future. I have no idea who they'll choose, but I'm pretty excited to see who it would be, whether the 49ers will stick with them for the whole season, and the effect that the choice has on the team as a whole. Some other questions for the 49ers going into 2023 include whether they can recover from all of the lost talent on their defensive line, whether Javon Hargrave will show that he's worth his new contract, how the defense will fare under their new defensive coordinator Steve Wilks, whether they can get Clelin Ferrell to revive his career, and whether they'll be able to get by with a below-average interior offensive line. And with that, now in the last 2 videos, we've discussed the biggest question for every single team in the NFL going into the 2023 season. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you guys watched both videos all the way through and liked and subscribed, it means so much to me and I really appreciate you. Again, I can't even put it into words how much it means to me. If you aren't subscribed already, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe so that you can come talk football with us. And I'd really appreciate if you could also give a like because it really helps out the channel. Anyways, if you're at this point in the video, you've heard me talk way too much. So I'm just going to leave it at thank you, and I really appreciate you, and I'll see you soon. Later.